Hey, welcome to devSchool, everybody. I'm going from meeting to meeting, and so we're going to start in about 30 seconds. My colleagues are joining, and so we're going to be soon. Well, there's no substitute for being live on air, I guess. Amy is going to hold my lab.
No, he paused. No, he did not pause. No. Ah, there I am.
No, just nine. I mean, yes, one in here. One, no, not one. Area code. Is it long distance? That's, isn't it our first? Is that good? Well, you'll find out later.
Are we looking for a room that's open? Is that the deal? Are we going to a room that's open?
I think they should be closing out. Hey, so we're getting started here. So, oh yeah, we're live. So this week we went through really the switch function was the sort of the core of the Code Academy, and we also learned about some operators. So the AND operator, the OR operator. And so one of the questions that I had, which I hope we can get into at some point, is the difference for when you would use the switch versus using an if-else statement. So that was like a big question that I had, and at the end of the lesson, you can do whatever you could have done whatever you want. You could have used a switch, or you could use if else. So that was one of the big questions that I had coming out of this week. And actually, let's keep this on. Oh, no problem. You guys want to? I invited you guys to the hangout.
Are others coming? This is it. Okay. Perfect.
So Amy, and I'm going to invite you guys, Dimitri, so you can actually share your screen if we needed to. So I can invite you to the hangout so you can be like one of us.
That's awesome.
So I won't share you. You don't have to accept. All right.
So great.
Jared.
Hey guys. Wait, can you hear me? I gotta turn that thing on.
Join it.
Okay, so we're gonna use is you can hear? So you're gonna mute yours. We're all gonna yeah, we're on mute. I can unmute myself, and yeah, I can hear myself. Yeah, we're good. Okay. We're set up.
Okay, good. Ready to roll.
Sorry guys, Christina and I are coming straight from another devSchool session, so it's a little like
Lot going on.
Okay,
All
here we
good
go.
things. So we want to start by going over the homework.
Oh, now we're good.
Good?
So I think what we're going to do, and this is adapting, apologies to people who are watching this later, is we will both project on the screen and share our screens, whatever is kind of the easier way to do it. And then let's definitely get feedback from all audiences afterwards.
Here, I'll give it to you.
Thanks. So we're going to start by just going over the homework. And then, as Eric said, we're going to tuck into, we had the if-else statement and then the switch statement this week. So of our audience members and those out on Slack.
Need to share your screen.
A lot going on. Okay. I think, okay, success. Okay. Just try one more. Not ideal, but I think we're giving it. Okay. Great. So of the audience, did you guys get to work through that example we had from last week where we ended with the if-else statement? We didn't get to writing the emails and adding the extra counts. Okay, so let's open that up. And I'm in a copy that's relinked under the practice from last week. So if you can be looking at what you used last week, or if you kind of lost track of that copy, go ahead and make a copy. Okay. We just give a little heads up. You're all set to go. So you can copy from week 4. There's a link in practice, called practice. I just brought it down so we can use that again today. Yep. And then if you open it, and then I recommend just making a copy. C2. Excellent. And then I'm in the help file because this has the completed code. But if you've been working, I think we all started in the code. That's probably where your homework is a little bit. Okay, so help week 3 or code week 3, depending on what you're working on. So does anyone want to just kind of remind us what we were doing in this for loop? Just take a minute to get our heads back in the project. Yeah, so in the, sorry, the second function, so looking at flag attendance.
So we wanted to basically give a flag to a student based on attendance value greater than or equal to 90% or not?
Exactly, great. So coming back, just taking a look again at the data we were working with. So our goal was to pull in this data range of students, and then for each row, we were going to evaluate if they were greater than or equal to 90%, we were going to push in the flag OK, and otherwise we were going to push in follow up. So once we had iterated through each row of the students in the data, at the end we were going to then paste that array into the sheet and set the flag. So let's tuck in. And something that I have found really helpful, just as I'm continuing to learn to code, is going through code and just kind of explaining what it does. So I'll start, but then if anyone wants to jump in and kind of explain the next iteration, please do so. So in this, we're making use of the Google Apps Script API. So this is where we kind of have that convergence of JavaScript and Google Apps Script. So the first thing we're doing is calling the class spreadsheet app get active. We're setting that variable as spreadsheet. So this is telling our function get the sheet that you're currently in. We're then narrowing our focus. So we're saying on this spreadsheet, get the sheet by name, sheet 1. And then after that, we're going to define the range. So we want to pull back the data. Before we do so, we need to tell the computer where exactly to look. So to do that, we're going to keep it dynamic. So we're going to start with getting the last row. So that sheet get last row, and that's a method on the sheet class. Same with last column. And then we're going to go ahead and get the range. So in this case, we're on the sheet class, and we're saying sheet get range. And just as a reminder, once you type the dot on a class, so sheet is a class within the Google Apps Script API, once you've done that, all of the methods, all of the things you can do to a sheet will appear. So if I forgot what the parameters were for what goes into get range, I could click on this, and I would scroll down to get range. And this is going to prompt me that we need the row, the count of rows, the columns, and the count of columns. In this case, I chose, well, that's interesting. It doesn't have a number of columns. Actually.
I guess that's optional.
Yeah, who knew? So there we go. So once we've defined the range, we're going to actually go in and get the data. So we'll set our variable to data. You can call it whatever. And we'll say range get values. So this is now we're performing the method get values on the range. And so let's just, always good practice is to see what it's looking like. So I'm going to save. We're in the flag attendance function. I'm going to go ahead and hit the debugger. Yeah. We are really zoomed in here. And we can see what we pulled in. So we were defining last row and last column to keep that range dynamic. So we know that there are 16 rows, 3 columns. This is our data, which is coming in as an array. Anytime you see this plus sign, you can go ahead and expand it. So I'm going to expand, and now I'm going to expect to see those students. And within each of this, so this is pulling in an array. And if I expand that, those are all the values for each row per student. Any questions in the Slack community, in the Hudson community? Okay, great. So next up, we're going to define that array flag. Why are we defining this now? Why it's an empty array? Why not define it once we're in the loop?
If we define it in the loop, it'll keep getting redefined over and over, and we'll wipe out
Exactly.
whatever the loop did.
Perfect. So each time we're going to push a value into the array. If that was the case, we would define it, it would empty itself, and then we would only push in a single value.
So actually, because of the scope inside the loop. So even if I call var flag equals, because it would redefine the empty array.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So at the end, what we would get, let's go ahead and do this. We can say, we're calling it var flag equals this. So we're going to define it down here. We're going to jump into the end of our loop and throw a debugger. And then let's go ahead and debug. And what do you expect to see in the flag array once we've gone through the loop? So we just did what Menika said. She said not to do, but we defined the flag array within our I loop. So in our I loop, this is where we're iterating each row of student for each row of student. We're going to be rewriting the flag array every time. And we haven't actually gotten there yet. So still thinking, what do we expect the flag array to show?
Can you scroll that line?
Mm-hmm. I guess to start with, what are we pushing into the flag array?
The attendance?
We're using the attendance to evaluate what should be pushed in. So if attendance is greater than or 90, greater than or equal to 90, we're going to push in.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Then otherwise, else we'll push in follow-up. So push is a method on an array that allows you to get the value in there. So if we loop through, let's just put these debuggers in here. Let's start again. So let's check our data. The first student right now has an attendance of 90. So we would expect 90 or greater. Flag array is going to be pushed to OK. So excellent. This is working out as we expect. And let's see what our flag array is now. Let's just unexpand this. OK, so flag pushed in. OK, we are good to go. And remember, for this array, we're trying to build it out. So at the end, we can set it back to our sheet. If we keep debugging, okay, so now we're up to student, we're still in the loop, the first loop. So now we're gonna, okay, now we're up to student 2. Let's check out our flag array. So now we've got follow-up. As Menika predicted, we overrode it. We're not pushing in a second value. We're just pushing in for that student. So if I was to comment out these debuggers, and we were to continue to do this, what do you think would be in the flag array when we got to that last student? What do we expect?
Okay. The last
Right?
student?
Why do we expect okay?
The last student?
Yeah.
Because they have 100% or 100 attendance?
Perfect. Yeah. So this would evaluate to the value okay. And that's going to be the last thing that lands. Great. But we don't just want the last student, we want all the students. So let's take this out of our loop. And now we're not going to overwrite it. And if we were to debug, a little hint, when you're hitting the debugger, if you lose it, you can click on this side and it will take you there. So I forgot we put that bug to start with. Okay, so now we are still inside the loop. So I'm going to take that and get outside of our I loop where we will be here for all 15 students. Okay, so, oh goodness. Well, I can just keep. Okay, made it. So at this point, we've iterated through the entire loop. That was very speedy. So let's check out what we have. So this time, awesome. We weren't overwriting our array. We were just pushing into it each time. So we can see here, based on students' attendance, how it evaluated. Okay, so what's going on then in line 56?
So it's highlighting. Is it highlighting the entire the sheet that you earlier called?
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, that's all I can see.
What do you mean by highlighting?
It's selecting.
Yep.
Selecting.
Yeah, so it's like you're having like you drag your cursor.
Yeah, that's exactly how I visualize it. As like somebody
Yeah.
dragged a cursor to some specified dimension, like X amount of rows, X amount of columns, and you want it to end at a certain place. So it's like as if a robot is doing this, but you're specifying to the robot, do this, then do this. This is the parameters.
Yeah, you got it. That's great. So we're telling it to highlight to point to row 2, column 3, and then we're gonna set that length of the array, and then we're gonna do this for one column. And then once we've set the parameters of that range, we're then gonna call the method set values. This is just once you've highlighted, now you're gonna write back to the sheet. And in this case, what we're writing back is this array that we just built called flag.
So what happens if I'm doing this and then between line 53 and 56, someone sorts the sheet?
Oh, that's a good question. We would be in trouble. I mean, if someone did that in the fraction of a second, yeah, because we are not basing it on like student ID or name, yeah. Because that's and that's not how the sorter is updated. In case that's the larger question. People are sorting in that process. Okay, so this next method that we call spreadsheet at flush, that just is something you want to use, especially if you're in debugger mode. Often the values, although we've told it to write it to the sheet, and it would successfully while you're in debugger mode, you won't necessarily see it, and it can be very frustrating. So I encourage you to put that directly after anywhere where you're setting a value. So then this last line that I think we just incorporated after the session. So this is leveraging MailApp, which is another class within the Google API. So on MailApp, you can see what you can do. Oh, wow. Okay, so you can send emails with a few different options, and then you can get your remaining daily quota, which I'm going to be investigating after this session. That's just curious. So in MailApp, you're passing in your email. And what if we wanted this value to be dynamic? So what if I did not want to hard code this here? What could we do? Hmm?
You can make it a variable.
Yeah, you got it. Awesome. So we could, at the top, if it was easy to find, we could say our email address using the old camel case.
You might even, make that a point person column in your attendance tool.
Ooh!
Tool.
Don't get too far ahead. Yeah. So then.
Or you can make it. You could also make it the active user.
Oh,
Like-
that's really smart. Yeah.
So you don't have to
Wow.
hard code that name. So then it's
Just saves some of us a lot of time. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you.
actually it'll be interesting. So if I put var email address and it was Amy who was running the script, would it fail or would it send an email as you but coming from her?
It would come from, and correct me if I'm wrong, it will come from Amy because it comes from the user, but it would go to me. So if I had
Go to you.
forgotten to comment out my email address when we made this and you guys were all practicing,
You would get
I
that.
would have gotten all those emails.
Yeah, you don't have a way of sending an email from somebody else's account, really.
No, like alias or something.
You can set up a no reply. You can set up a reply to or a no reply, but you can't actually make the initial that then comes from.
So send an email. The first argument is the person who's going to.
Yeah. And then second argument is the title. And then the third is the body of the message. So I'm seeing these variables that we have not covered, but this was in the homework. Does anyone want to take a stab at what we were doing and maybe take a minute to look back in the code? So what are we doing and what do we expect to see for count OK and count follow up? You guys take 2 minutes. Mankind, you came in after we made this, but this file is in week 4 under practice.
That's what it is, thank you. Is there a script sitting on the link?
Are we feeling good in Hudson Ground? Okay,
Mhm.
excellent. Who wants to take a go at it? What is the count OK and count follow up trying to do?
What is it trying to do?
Or what? Why are we incorporating this? What do we expect it to produce?
So those should be integers.
How do you know that?
Well, they're called up in line 40. Well, maybe it's a little lower.
Where we define it?
Yeah, where you
Yeah.
well, yeah. So they're starting as 0, but then they're part of the if else statement below, and they just get added to. And you start at 0, but you just add one more every time I is, or just a row in the array
is called out, or not a row in the array, but I guess what's the correct way to refer to it? It's an ith in the
Exactly.
Like every time the loop iterates, it increases I, but it also increases count OK if the attendance is greater than or equal to 90, or it increases count follow-up if otherwise.
Yep. Yeah, and by setting it as 0, we set it as an integer. Although I guess technically that doesn't matter. And then the plus
It's a number.
means go up by 1 each time. So I don't know if you do, but I found myself using this definitely throughout scripts just to have like some sort of summary log at the end. I found it really helpful. So if we go ahead and debug it, we can see this.
Because if you were given an array and you wanted to count the number of OKs after you had already done everything, you would have to loop back through that array and count them, right? There's no way to just count an array, or there is? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. There's a different way, a different way to do it would be to count.
Almost like filter an array and then count.
You're right.
Right? You have to loop through and count every time you hit one.
Right, a different way might have been to build like an OK array.
A follow-up array.
The way this is built, there's not really a good way to do it, so you have to loop back through, but there is a way to count an array. But in this case, both of them are being pushed to the same array, so the count is just going to be the same as it was at the end.
So you can easily count through AppScript or JavaScript, you can easily count the length of an array, but you can't easily filter an array. You need to iterate through it and count the cases that you're hitting one or the other. Okay. So in this case, it's easier to throw in that count within the same loop that creates it, so that you're not doing
it.
double.
Otherwise, you have to do a second. Yeah. So I'm gonna hit the debugger, and we can just see the count come up. There it is. Okay, so it landed in the OK. We should see that variable, which is defined after the array flag. So this is iterated up to 2, and that makes sense because there are 2 OKs and 2 follow-ups. Okay, cool. So I'm going to comment that out. And so coming back to this mail app, we're now going to get an email that will have a message of how many OKs there were and how many follow-ups. So let's go ahead and let's just run this. And here we are. So awesome.
Nice.
Any questions on that? Okay, great. So then at this point,
Oh, sorry.
yeah.
So in JavaScript, an array is sorted in a particular order. Like it needs to be in the same order that you've put it in. So for example, when you're doing in .push, it's going to push into the end of the array, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like as you're building up,
yes,
it'll push it
yes,
up into
yeah.
that. Is there a way, or would one want to push into the middle?
To the middle?
Or does it seem like a useless
There's
task?
ways to do this, yeah. I mean,
It's like you would have to specifically define that.
Like, yeah, if you Google just like JavaScript array methods, you can see all different things. But there's something called unshift, which pushes to the front.
Okay.
And then you could slice, which is push it somewhere in the middle, and it takes in the index at which you want to push it.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
Okay. But by default, push is always going to go to the end. Okay.
And it does the same thing with array of arrays. If you have an array composed of 2 clusters of data, another 2 clusters of data, which are arrays into themselves, will it push into each one of these arrays at the very end? Like, we've had arrays of arrays, right?
yeah. And that's what,
Yeah, like our data is.
Is arrays, and so it'll push at the very end. Okay.
Yeah, to push into one of those inner arrays, you would have to access it from its own index in the other array, right?
Yeah. So the array might be like the first element in that whole array, and that first element contains 3 pieces of data because it's in itself an array, and then you put something right at the end of it.
And it will go underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's test all that out. So in the copy that you've made, if you jump into, oh no, you've already made a copy. Well, I've given all the answers. I haven't given all the answers, but I gave more than I wanted. So what I wanted you guys to do was, we can just run to part 2 at this point, which is taking the code in the help doc, and it might make sense to just copy it into code at this point if you want. But building off this, we currently have an if-else statement there, and this week focused on expanding that into using else-if too. So this is kind of where you have the switch statement and you have the if-else statement. So why don't you, this is pointing right now at sheet 2. And yeah, so it's pretty much doing the same thing that we were just working on, but let's go ahead and add in 2 more if-else statements. Give you guys a few minutes to do that, and then test it out, write it back to the sheet. Don't be afraid to throw in a few more debuggers into the for loop.
Paste instance. Say if attendance, if cohort is 2016. And so when I set the variable bar cohort equals some row, the cohort is in the column B. It's not in a, it's in a column. Why do we do this along? Why did you here have this attendance row 2?
So that's, well, let's,
Reminding me it's too complicated.
nope, let's throw in a debugger and make sure, so we can see kind of how the data is pulling in.
Okay.
And it's gonna comment out this last part. Let's see there.
Oh yeah. No.
It, I think we,
Did I do something? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I guess I'm not sure how to use this debugger to answer that question.
what's it?
So I'm not sure how to use the debugger to answer that question.
So what do you want to do? I think the first question was, why are we saying attendance is row 2?
Yes.
Okay. So let's take a look. So the first thing we do is define attendance, and how is that variable coming in? This is the global, yeah, so let's.
Row 6. Okay.
So that is row, okay. So row is coming in as an array of the first row.
So row is coming in as an array of the first row.
So this is what it looks like, and then if you expand that
Oh, okay.
array, this is.
So it looks like this thing. Okay.
So then that's what we're doing for row. But on
Gotcha.
the second line,
Mhm.
we're now saying attendance is equal to,
Is less than 90.
well, let's make sure what's attendance doing there?
Attendance equals row 2.
Okay, so what value do we expect to see for attendance?
90.
Exactly.
So
And if you scroll down in the debugger, because that's defined after row, that's coming in correctly. Good,
it's coming incorrectly or correctly?
correctly.
Just so attendance less than 90. So this attendance, it's in row 2. This
So,
contains all of this values.
so this is where this might be confusing. So row is referencing each row of the data.
Okay.
And then we're defining attendance where in that row of data,
Mhm.
it is in the second position.
Ah, okay. It's in the second position, and so the second position is 1.
Yeah.
Oh, 0, 1,
0,
2.
1, 2, you got it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's how we can pull in.
Okay. And then if attendance, and then
So now we've got that variable.
Ah,
So
gotcha.
now this is just going to keep our code nice
Oh,
and
okay.
clean. We could have just said,
if
we
attendance,
could have even said data I2 here,
Yeah.
but this just makes it easier to read.
okay. If attendance is less than 90, then push in right here the word follow-up.
So we're pushing on this array, which is category. So we define category up there. And by doing that, we're saying make this an array, and it's currently empty. But
Okay.
now, if attendance is less than 90, we're going to push into that array this message.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Okay. Just, okay.
Where are we in terms of, see how that's going? Are you guys ready to share out? Do we want a few more minutes? I'm seeing mixed signals from the peanut gallery. Let's take another 2 minutes. Ready to share out?
Yeah, I could share.
Okay,
It's not
awesome.
completely finished because it's not sending her an email, but it's like just need to fix the email.
Okay, great. Are you on the Hangout?
No.
Okay.
I think you just add yourself. I mean, go.
Or I can pass the
Yeah.
board, whichever is easier.
Just I invited you, and I'll share your screen when you're ready.
Just make sure there's no student data.
Yeah, no student data.
Hold on. If that's the case. Yeah, there's no student data.
Perfect.
Did you share my screen?
No.
You need to share your screen. So yep, there you go.
Okay.
That's your screen. You got it.
Is it presenting to everybody?
It is.
Wonderful. Okay,
You just
so
need to click to see your. Yeah, that's what's being projected.
That makes sense.
That's what's on her screen.
all right. So what I did over here was I just added in an else if statement. with an additional variable. So I said if attendance is less than 50%, then I called them LTAs. And then at the top here, I just added an additional variable so that eventually I can add them in my email for their count. And then when I went back to look at the flags, when I ran through it, it flagged correctly because this is my LTA.
Yay, excellent. Nice.
Thank you. Nicely done.
Awesome. Great. Okay. Any questions on that? Ready to move on. Okay, great. So now let's.
Do you want to reshare your screen?
I do.
It's like Jared's satellite.
It shows Jared because the mic is connected.
Right.
Let me change that by clicking on.
Well, she's not sharing anything.
Oh, right.
She's sharing this infinite.
A while loop, if you will.
While I am not sharing my screen, we will see that. It's no longer true.
This is a level of geek that I don't think I'm prepared for.
Oh, it's prepared.
Oh, it looks like we had some folks online. That's excellent. Okay. So now let's tuck in to the case statement. And Jared, I'd love for you to chime in. I was trying to think through, I did for a while use the case statement quite a bit. And what I use it for often in like any sort of like sorter or tool update is to evaluate on like a master spreadsheet I have based on school type, go look at this sheet and run these functions. So that's definitely my like main go-to. Jared, do you have others you want to chime in on?
Honestly, I started using them a lot when I like first learned about them, but then I don't really have a good. It's not clear to me when they're better to use than if else, and I find if else easier to read. So I almost never use them, but there might be good reasons to use them. Like performance-wise or something, but I don't know. It's not clear to me about that.
Performance-wise, it would be faster because the case breaks as opposed to if else, it has to evaluate through all of them.
Well, and it also stops at the first one that's true, though. It's the same. So Eric sent us a link offline, and it was saying case statements have the ability to kind of self-optimize, but that's dependent on the language. So I don't know if that's true for JavaScript or not. Like the compiler will kind of sense. I don't know how it works, but there might be like performance using that scale, but like. I think it's fine if you never use one again. It might be
Where else do you use the break?
So the break tells you to get out of a function.
Where else instead of a case? Switch case?
Yeah. Do you use break?
Breaks. You can use break to get out of a loop. So like. Typically it will be inside an if or like an else or something, or typically it will be in an if. So if you're looping and you want to stop at like the first, you want to stop looping the first time something's true, you just put a break.
Okay, that's interesting. So if you wanted to find the first instance of whatever you're trying to look for, then break out, then they'll stop the loop.
Yeah.
I guess, would you do that within the curly brace after the condition? You set the condition, or would you do that outside?
So you're in a for loop?
Yeah, so can we just actually do it?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if this is a relevant topic. but it sounds interesting.
It's all relevant.
So like, if we go back to the week 3 example, and you go down, so like, what if I wanted to like still count the first student who is below 980, but then break?
So you want to make sure it counts once and then get out?
And then break out of the loop.
Yes, you just do your break after.
Right there.
Yeah.
So we've counted and now we're breaking.
And it would still push the array. And then,
But it would only push that first.
The first
It would
time
push
we
every
played it,
follow-up
too.
before the first 90, and it
Right.
would push the first 90.
okay.
So are breaks more useful in a while loop because the while will continue to operate until the condition is not true? So you have to forcibly break it at some point?
I mean, the while loop itself is going to break when you meet some
When
condition.
it meets some condition.
Presumably, so I don't know.
Yeah, if you passed it in, it would break
Yeah,
the first time.
yeah, as soon as it's not true.
Um,
Okay. Okay. I'm just thinking, because I know while loops in like other languages are seen as incredibly dangerous because you could potentially lock your computer in this like infinite while. If you wrote it
want
wrong.
to like protect against
Yeah.
like a runaway function that'll like leave the stack overflow. So you just like you can put a break like if
it's been too long, then yeah. Or if you had a counter, and if the counter gets up to like 1,000, just stop.
Yeah, that's a nice example.
Okay.
Great. Okay. All lovely questions. So,
and there's a companion. Oh, we're right. This. Let's do this.
what do you?
No, there's also like I think of breaks. There's kind of like a companion. I don't know what you call these things, but there's a phrase continue, which is like kind of the opposite. It's like break like stops the loop right where you're at. Continue stops it for that iteration, but then keeps looping. So do all the code up to the continue, and then just restart the loop.
So it like advances it without actually having to.
We can do an example of that for sure. But those, I think of those together because they're like two different ways to like stop looping or manipulate looping.
Great. So for this case statement, let's just kind of moving. I'm just gonna grab this first top part of what we have, and please follow along.
Yeah, Myers,
That's
please,
helpful.
present, thank you.
Okay, so let's close this function. Always, I've lost enough time just losing track of these curly braces brackets, so I highly recommend when you open it, just close it right away. Another little formatting tip, if you do Control-A and then Tab in here, that will format it correctly, so it will indent this, the 2 spaces that the code editor wants. It's a nice way to keep it clean. And then you can always see where your brackets line up. So these two are green. If I was to put a red one, this is now red because there isn't a meat to it. Okay. So I added counselor into this example. So if we jump to sheet 2 now, we can evaluate on counselor. So we've got counselor A, B, and C. And let's try using them for the switch statement, see if we're a fan. So we're pointing to sheet 2. We've got the range, we've got our data. Excellent. And now this time, let's set 3 arrays. So let's do counselor A, counselor B, and counselor counselor C. And maybe we can imagine these are, you know, like 3 data arrays that we want to send in an email or a notification or paste into different sheets. Okay, so we've got our arrays. Now let's go ahead and write our for loop. So for var I equals 0, I is less than data.length, and then I plus plus, we're going to increase by 1 each time. So within this, we're going to, let's just first make this a little cleaner. So let's say row again, var row equals data I. And let's just double check what we've got there. Oh, I did not rename this. So this case statement. Oh, down to 3 minutes. Thank you. Ooh. Okay. Was that
Yes, time flies.
Or slow it down.
No, it was time flies.
Okay, so our row has come in. Here we are. We want to evaluate on counselor, so we're going to pass in row and then in the 3rd position. Okay, so now I'm going to just give that variable. So let's say counselor, and this is row position 3. So now let's go ahead and do that case statement. So we're going to say switch, and this is where we'll pass in counselor. And this has the brackets. And this is where we now go ahead and define our cases. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the things here is you need to know exactly what you're passing in. So since we're evaluating a counselor, we need to have the exact names of the counselor. So case 1 was counselor A. And in this case, if we get to counselor A, we're going to go grab this counselor A array, and we're going to push, let's just push the student name. Let's push, you can here say, I think you could do data I and then position of student name, which is 0. I think to be cleaner, let's just define it here and say student. And then we'll say row, and it's in the 0th position. And so now we're going to go ahead and push student. And then we want to say break, and we're up for the next case. So the second case, there was counselor B. And then let's just grab this, and we're going to change the array this time. If we evaluate here, we'll push into counselor B array, and then don't forget the break. And then our last one, oops, not what we want. We're going to evaluate for counselor C. We're going to push in to that array. And then I'm just going to go ahead and Control A, tab, to get the format. I'll take stellar. And there we go.
There we go.
So let's go ahead and just move this debugger down. Whoa, not all the way down there. So if you highlight and do Alt and then the arrows, it will move it up or down. Control will move it all the way down. So if I was doing this and wasn't rushed for time, I would prefer to put a debugger in earlier just to make sure before I run this whole thing that it's working. but that's okay. Well, let's see how it does. Can anyone really quickly just explain what do we anticipate seeing when we get to this debugger, which is at the very end of our function?
Well, whenever it sees the case of counselor A, it will push into the array the student row. So
And it's in the row, it's row in the 0th position. So that value is the student.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we should see this, and in this case, the student name.
Okay. And then it'll do so through each iteration of counselor B. If it sees that, it'll push in to in the first, whatever is in the first row, the first item in the array. Then the same for counselor C as well.
Exactly. Yep. And once it sees it, it will break out of that loop and it will get to the next student. So let's go ahead. Let's debug this so we can see what it produces, since we're not logging it anywhere or returning. Lovely.
Nice.
Okay. So we've got our 3 arrays that initially were empty, and now based on this switch statement, you can see that counselor A had 9 students, he had 6, C had 3, and when we expand that array, we were just pushing in this case, we were just pushing a name, but we could have pushed the whole row. We could have pushed the name plus the attendance, and then we can imagine either setting this to a sheet with counselor's name on it, or sending an email. Whole lot of possibilities out there.
So what's maybe the homework should be to send the emails to these 3 counselors?
Yeah, I would recommend doing one of 2 things, either based on each array, sending an email with some of that information to you or to me, or you can practice writing this back to the sheet. So maybe in the switch statement, you also want to be passing in a sheet name based on the counselor. So instead of counselor A gets sheet 3 or something named by after them, counselor B, sheet counselor B, etc.
I'd say if you're going to do the writing to the sheet, try to write 2 columns, like think of 2 columns to write back at once, because that, we haven't done that, and I just feel like it took me a while conceptually, these nested arrays, and like how the nested arrays relate to a spreadsheet is just like a little bit confusing. So just make sure you're able to like, you're gonna have to change the range that you write back to and stuff like that to map to fit. So I would do that. And if you're gonna do the email, I would try to like BCC somebody or something on it as well, because that's not. You'll have to like go into the documentation for the API and like figure out how to do that. It's like not super hard, but it's good practice to just understand how to read the documentation and like find those things. So
if I could summarize the homework assignment, and we'll send it out in writing tomorrow. The goal is to maybe partner up with 2 other people, and they could be your counselors, and maybe partner up with another person who's the principal, and maybe the goal is to put in an email to students who have below a certain threshold of attendance, who are in a counselor's caseload. And then in the email also maybe link them to the sheet where they can find this information, and then maybe prompt the person who you're sending an email to enter something into that sheet. That would be like mastery.
And CC your principal.
And CC your principal, or BCC your principal.
Fake principal.
Fake principal.
Fake principal. Yes, nothing is real.
No.
Can I get access to that? Because this is a copy.
Oh, this is a copy now.
You could also just post that, like type that into Slack.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So I will pop this code right now into Slack, and then you can grab it and put it in. Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
In person and from afar.
Yeah, thanks, guys.